vulnerable residents, students, and families. And then less than 48 hours before the school system is supposed to vote on their final adopted budget, an even newer proposal emerged. And so, to be very clear, I am beyond frustrated with this process, and so many other people are as well. Our teachers, our parents, and our staff should not have to go through this year after year, waiting for ever-changing budgets to see how they get impacted, some of them for their livelihoods. The council adopts and passed our $7.9 billion budget just a few weeks ago. But the problem is we truly don't know where half of it goes once it goes to MCPS. I've spoken to so many parents and educators and taxpayers who are concerned that trust is broken. Once we write one big check, there is no recourse, there is no clarification. Sometimes our questions aren't even answered. And so over the last 7 years, enrollment in MCPS has declined nearly 10,000 students, while the MCPS budget has increased by $1 billion. We have a lot of questions about how that is possible and where the money is going. We need more transparent budgets. We need better partnerships with MCPS and county government from the very beginning of the budget process, not at the very end like we're talking about right now. And I recognize that our school system and our students are facing incredible needs. Teachers and staff are stretched thin. Students are going to school with mental health concerns. More students with disabilities need accommodations. And there are immigrant students and their families who are scared to leave their homes because they might be picked up by immigration services. All of that is real. There's no questions about that. But the questions are about the funding that we've provided and how academic incomes continue to be down, how achievement gaps continue to increase, and how school buildings continue to fall into disrepair. Those are all legitimate questions. People ask me about it all the time. I ask the school system, and sometimes we don't get answers. That is why we are here today, because we need more transparency, we need more accountability, and we need more oversight. And so with that, I want to thank all of our community leaders, some of whom are former elected officials, to talk about their perspective about the school system and how we have to strengthen it to make sure that every child gets the best education possible. First, I want to introduce Anrio St. Gerard, who is a parent within the Sherwood High School cluster, a number of kids there, and is a leader within the Montgomery County PTA. He is a seasoned advocate, and his advocacy is specifically centered on HVAC and PTA leadership, recognizing that we need good facilities and we need good classrooms as well. So, Anrio, I'll invite you up.
Thank you, Evan. As Evan stated, my name is Anrio St. Gerard. I am the Sherwood Cluster Coordinator and with 3 kids in MCPS. The issue that Evan is describing here is not new. The system is broken. My advocacy for the last 3 or 4 years has been about looking for funding on the capital side for HVAC replacement and on the operational side for HVAC deferred maintenance. My advocacy has never been solely about securing more funding. It's been about ensuring the resources are planned, prioritized, and managed effectively to meet the needs of students. The challenges I've faced in my advocacy have been advocating for solutions that cannot clearly be understood because I don't understand where the money is, where it's being spent, and the priorities are driven by decisions and how the budget changes affect individual schools. Instead of discussions about solutions, my advocacy has primarily focused a lot of times on reactionary things to dire warnings about potential cuts without understanding the full picture. The concern is especially relevant today. If you look at what's going on right now, MCPS for the last few weeks has been discussing cutting hundreds of positions to fill a $36 million gap for a budget that is $143 million above last year's budget. Just doesn't make sense. Furthermore, when you look at 36 million that was removed from the capital budget, specifically for HVAC, this has impacted me and the inability to get straight answers on whether two schools in my cluster, Sherwood High School and Rosa Parks Middle School, will get their scheduled and planned HVAC replacements in the coming years. My inability to get an answer from MCPS and from our elected officials, not because of anything on their end or their fault, has been a problem and only reinforces the issue with the budget. A healthy budget process should not rely on threats of eliminating critical staff and services as part of the annual budget negotiations, or be defined about how much money it receives. It is defined by transparency, by how much, better planning, and confidence that every dollar, whether operational or capital, is being used effectively to meet our students' needs. As an advocate for not only the Sherwood cluster, but for all our schools in Montgomery County, it's reasonable for families to ask questions about where and how funding continues to grow while infrastructure challenges persist and essential student services remain at risk. Our community deserves a budget process that is transparent, accountable, and capable of meeting both the needs and long-term solutions for our students.
Thank you very much, Henrio, for your leadership within the Sherwood cluster and across all of the county. Next guest I'd like to bring up is no stranger to the Montgomery County School Board or to Annapolis. Honorable Ana Sol Gutierrez served both on the school board and as a delegate in the House of Delegates, and she understands the importance of transparency and accountability at all levels of government. Ana Sol.
I appreciate your being here and covering this very important topic that is like the third rail, and everybody's afraid to touch it. But thanks to Evan's leadership, I think we have to bring this topic up, and we have to discuss it, and we have to expose as much of the thinking of reform that is very necessary in the school system. I didn't prepare any remarks, but I'll tell you from memory, because I was elected way back in 1990, and I served 8 years to 98. And just to put you in focus, I was the first one to introduce in 1994 air conditioning in the schools, because air conditioning was only put into new schools as they were being built, but they were being built in the upper part of Montgomery County. What happened was in downtown, where I lived down near Silver Spring and Chevy Chase, those schools were not ever considered for HVAC. So I dared to propose, and it passed, to start in a gradual way with adding air conditioning. After I'd gone to a primary school, and all the kids were in the gym with huge fans, just sitting around because they couldn't stand the heat in their own classrooms. So go back to those times, and it was much worse then. But I want to pinpoint on the fact that I saw 8 budgets, and I had on the board, you have the opportunity to get from the superintendent a budget proposal. And there is their time to review everything. And Montgomery County Public Schools is the largest enterprise we have in the county. We have more buses than the ride-on, more employees than the county. It is a huge enterprise. I'm a system engineer by profession, and so I came to it with data and systems, and so I was eager to get that. But lo and behold, the budget did not have any real data, any basis for what the proposals were. They are prepared by the state regulations. They have to be in categories, but the categories are so high level that you don't really have the opportunity to look where the money is really going. As Evan has had the unfortunate opportunity to get those kind of answers, because I couldn't get them as a board member. And it really should not be that way. The school system has to be managed in a transparent and accountable way that, in my opinion, it never has been. So to step up now and ask for that kind of reform of thinking, of accountability, even if the state doesn't require it, because they only require the up-level categories. But for our own constituents, for our own residents, for our own students, we have to know what they're doing with all that money, because it's an enormous amount of money. It's more than half of the county expenditures. It used to be 75% of the county expenditures. So I really think the time is now. The time has come where we have to get a very public outcry to demand that the school system itself begin to change the way it has been doing budgets and the way it is accountable. And the school board, we have an opportunity to elect new members of the school board. They need to hold the superintendent accountable, but they don't have the time, they don't have the staff, and they don't have as much information about how to make the right decisions. So it's a joint effort, but it has to be initiated by the school system to stand up and be accountable, be responsible for what it is, the delivery of this most important services, because education and our kids are the most important thing that we can have focus on in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Sol, for again, your lifetime of leadership here in Montgomery County. And just to underscore the point that she made, so many families move to Montgomery County and remain in Montgomery County because of our school system, and we must make our school system the best it can be. And the only way we can do that is by making sure we know where every dollar goes. So thank you. Next, another former school board member, Phil Kaufman, who was an at-large member of the Board of Education and served for 8 years. He was first elected in 2008. Phil.
So thanks, Evan, for starting this conversation, which I think is an important conversation to have. I will say when I came on the school board in 2008, if we think that it is bad today, in 2008, we were in the midst of the fiscal meltdown in the county. It was not a question of cutting $30 million from the budget. It was a matter of how many hundreds of millions of dollars we would be cutting from the budget. Unfortunately, the relationship at that time, and I think it has improved, but part of the problem was the relationship at that time between the school board and the county council was not a good relationship.
Choose your own adjectives, yeah.
Choose my own adjective, to say the least. It was not when times are good and prior years, the school system would be getting hundreds of millions of dollars in addition, because we had a very generous county council, we had a generous state, and Jerry Weiss was the superintendent at the time, and he was able to propose large salary increases, large staffing increases, and those did make an impact on student achievement. And Montgomery County was considered a world-class school system. People had, this place had the reputation richly deserved for having one of the finest school systems in the country. But when that recession hit in 2008, suddenly we were making cuts. And there was a lot of finger pointing in terms of, well, does the school board, and just talking about the budget, as Sol has talked about, the superintendent presents a budget to the school board. The way the process worked at that time. I think it's pretty much the same. The superintendent, in developing his budget, would convene a budget advisory committee. Then it was the 3 unions and MCC-PTA that worked on that budget advisory committee. The school board had nothing to do with that superintendent's recommendation. And it was sort of baked in that, these are what the stakeholders, these are what the unions want, these are what the parents want, so how dare the school board question, those staffing models that were being proposed. And there really wasn't a whole lot of pushback, I think, from the board on what the superintendent would recommend. But when there were cuts to be made, the way it worked then was the superintendent would reconvene that budget advisory committee and said, well, I've now been directed to cut $100 million. What do the stakeholders recommend in terms of how we should make those cuts? And that's how a final cut list would be developed. But I think we still need to go back to the fact that there was this inherent distrust by the county council that the school board adequate, and I don't mean to criticize our school boards then, our school board now, county council then, county council now. These are all hardworking people who are trying to do the best that they can. But there was a lack of trust that the school board had to, as Anasol said, we didn't have staff to really review the budget. We were part-time. So you have 7 part-timers, they have had other jobs, now being tasked with looking at this at then $2.5 billion budget. We'd schedule 2 or 3 work sessions, where we'd spend maybe 2 hours at a work session asking a few questions about the budget. We'd have public hearings where the community would weigh in on, we need this, we need that, we need, at the time it was, assistant, whatever. I mean, it was media systems, whatever the ask was. We had plenty of asks, but the school board really was not in a position to make major changes to the budget. And then the budget would be passed on to the superintendent, to the county executive, and then to the county council. And the county council really didn't trust, because the county council, when they do their budget process, they could be spending hours and hours and hours at a committee meeting looking at a $50,000 line item, whereas we were not making that kind of extensive review of all the positions that were in the school budget. So I think that is a process that needs to be changed. I'd suggest that the county executive, to the extent that there's a budget advisory committee by the superintendent, have the county executive put a person on that budget advisory committee. That's where it all starts, and that's where the sausage is made. And I think that would be a good place to have, an additional stakeholder from the county council, from the county executive, in that process up front. There was one year where the superintendent actually put me as a board member on that budget advisory committee. I learned more about the budget in those meetings than I ever learned about being on the school board. So, those are a few things I think we could look at, but, historically, the bottom line is this has been a process that has always been flawed. And I'll say one more suggestion, which would require extensive legislation, but really a lot of review. We are one of the few states where we have what is called a fiscally dependent school board, which means we're dependent on the county council to raise the revenues for us. In most other states, the school board raises taxes. And that creates a level of accountability for the school board. If they adopt the budget, they have to, if they want to raise taxes to fund that budget, they have to go to the voters and defend that. And I think that potentially has the ability to create a little bit more accountability. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for those thoughts, Phil. And I want to go back to a point that you made. This is not about finger pointing or blame. It is about getting it right. because the process for decades has been the same and it's not working, and there is a lack of trust. So we need to restore that trust. Next, I would like to invite Matthew Kamens, who is a former MCPS employee. He is now retired, and he spent nearly 30 years as a school psychologist, and he has been an incredible and strong advocate for children and families and behavioral health and mental wellness programs. And I know he is troubled by what he is seeing that is either in or potentially out of this budget, but he takes a holistic look at caring for all of our kids. So Matthew.
Thank you. I do have some prepared comments, and I hope that I make you understand where I'm coming from, because we're talking about our kids. My wife and I have lived in Montgomery County since 1979. My 2 adult children graduated successfully from Montgomery County Public Schools. I believe in public school education. I worked as a school psychologist and supervisor of psychological services for MCPS for 33 years, retiring in 2022. Just prior to retirement, the Board of Education presented me with Distinguished Service to Public Education Award. I guess I must have done something right. I'm here today to support the mental wellness and behavioral health of the students and staff in Montgomery County Public Schools. I appreciate that the Board of Ed has determined to reinstate 18 school psychologist positions. Yet, there are 2 critical resource psychologist positions, pupil personnel worker positions, special educator positions, safety and security personnel positions, social worker positions, and college and career counselor positions, among other key behavioral support and wellness positions that should be reinstated. We are all familiar with, and our kids learn about, the unalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I suggest it's our mutual interest to recognize the unalienable rights for children and youth to be happy, healthy, and learning. Multiple stressors impact children and directly lead to worry and negative rumination. In turn, repeated stress is traumatic. Trauma hastens the onset of anxiety and depression and seriously impacts focus, attention, and coping skills, and stimulates conditions of anger and frustration. For children and youth, anxiety and depression decrease the conscious efforts that are needed to maintain time on task, sustain concentration on schoolwork, allow for social emotional development and interpersonal interaction, and support academic engagement. There's never a day when the news, print, or other media, elected officials, families, students, graduates do not remark on the impact of trauma and stress on children and their families. Children and youth are impacted by stressors that negatively influence behavioral and mental wellness. That's why the legacy of schooling is the people that are there, not only to teach the ABCs and or multiplication and division, but to teach how to cope with trauma, with feelings of acceptance and rejection, with making and keeping friends, with problem solving and solution seeking. Many of us remember the caring adult that spent time with us when we were down and out. Many of us remember the kind words, "I know it's hard, but I believe in you." We carry those legacy moments our entire lives and try to model and convey what we learn to our kids. Schools need teachers, and schools need mental health support staff. This is a trying time nationally and internationally. Kids are struggling to understand right from wrong, to determine if telling lies is better than speaking the truth. Schools do not work without people. Growing up is tough. Things get in the way. Schoolwork is hard. Making friends is cumbersome. Managing stress is impactful. Failure is frightening. The moods and adjustments needed to grow from children to teens and from teens to young adults can be easily compromised without supportive school-based mental health staff members. By eliminating staff positions that focus on mental wellness, are we saying to our children and their families that behavioral health is not central to student achievement? The true legacy of a school system is defending the children by surrounding them with the human resources they need to be successful now and in the future. Schools are judged by their willingness to support all their staff in tough times. Schools are judged by understanding the virtue of mental wellness and social emotional learning. Schools are judged by how they honor their commitments. Schools are judged by their impact on their community. School legacy is to reconsider staffing cuts as tools to balance budgets. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for your service, Matthew, and for your words, because we can provide the best classrooms with the best teachers and the best programs, but if a child enters that room with food insecurity, housing insecurity, economic insecurity, family instability, there will be more challenges to teaching that child, and appreciate your work, Matthew, to helping them. Our last speaker this afternoon is Laura Mitchell. Among the many things she does in this community, she is the co-founder of Montgomery Goes Purple, a countywide coalition promoting substance use, promoting substance abuse remedies and mental illness prevention and recovery. And she's also one of the superintendent's community champion for children. Laura. The first one, thank you.
I had it right the first time with substance use. We're trying to reduce stigma. That's another big thing that we do, and a lot of that has to do with how we speak about the issues that we just heard about in our schools. I am Laura Mitchell. I am an accountant by trade and training, and an advocate by necessity. Family matters to friends and other relatives. It is really, really critical that we are able now to treat these in the schools. Not just to treat them, but to see them, to spot them. Most of our folks who succumb to suicide, who die by suicide, there are signs, there are warning signs, there are red flags, but most of us are not trained to see them. I teach classes in the community to help people understand what those signs are and to see them and to intervene. If we pull these mental health and social workers and all these other supports that were just mentioned, I won't enumerate them again, out of our schools, who is going to notice those? Who is going to intervene? Who is going to help them get to the care that they need? And what care will they get to? Because in the community, it can take anywhere from 4 months to 4 years to get to a provider, to get an appointment, to get an evaluation that the psychologists do in our school. And probably $5,000 at least. Our psychologists do that in the school. We have the ability to bill Medicaid and potentially other insurances for the services that we're offering in the school, but we're not doing that. So we're paying for their being there and their services with our tax money, and then we're paying for them in our premiums for our insurance, and then we're just paying, and it's duplication. It's a lot of unnecessary duplication. If we're able to drill down in our budgets and see where those costs are, see what those costs are, and look for those solutions and ways that we can bill insurance companies and Medicaid and others to recoup that money, they will pay for themselves. One of our proposals, this did come at the very last minute, the addition of the psychologists, the social workers, many other special education and community homeschool liaisons, and a $1.6 million grant. It's listed as a grant that funds Thrive and Jessa being in our schools and running prevention programs and awareness programs, mental health services. If we lose those, the impacts will be felt by everybody in one way or another. If it's not your child or your friend's child or your neighbor or your relative, it may show up in your home as crime. It may show up in your home as one of your friends losing, one of your children's friends losing their life. And they show up in many, many different ways. When we don't treat mental health issues, identify them and treat them early, they often end up with substance use on top of that. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. It showed up in 2022 as we came back to school from the pandemic. We lost a student a week from January to June in MCPS. All but 2 were to suicide or overdose. That was the stressor showing up. That stressor was there pre-pandemic, it's there post-pandemic. It's not going away until we treat it. We have seen drops in our overdose rates in Maryland. It's dropped almost 50%, 40+% in our overdose fatalities. There are a lot more overdoses than we can count because if they don't go to the hospital or or call EMS, then we don't pick up, our police aren't involved. We don't pick up those numbers if someone's giving each other Narcan. There's reversal drug. We don't see those numbers. So we're really trying to encourage everyone to do that. One of the ways that I see that we could do that in this coalition that we put together is moving those social workers to HHS, which can be largely funded by the billing component, having them in the schools in the same model that we use for school nurses and health techs, and still having our kids have our support where the social workers and others have more support themselves and can do a better job. But we cannot lose these services. And showing up at the last minute with these cuts that we don't even have time to put together all the resources that show the hundreds of studies that show that school-based mental health services are the place, the best solution to this and the best way to access the kids. They're already there, and that's probably their number one stressor in most cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the work that you do across the county. It does save lives, and it does keep families whole. So thank you. You know, what you've heard this afternoon are people who are deeply committed to teaching every child, supporting every educator, and making sure that Montgomery County has the best school system. But it is not without our challenges, and we have to address that. We have to say that our budget system is broken, and as we continue providing record levels of funding to MCPS, we have to continue requiring greater levels of transparency so that we know where every dollar we're allocating goes. And we want that to go to the classroom, to our educators, and to a better school system. With that, I'll open it up any questions. Yeah, Tom.
Tom, Bashir from Dental Plus. I guess if I was a doctor, I'd say you diagnose the problem. But what's the prescription? Montgomery County School Board is a completely independently elected governing body. You are an independently elected body. What force mechanism would you have at your disposal to make them do any of the things you're talking about?
This is a structural issue that we're trying to address, and you're absolutely right. So there are 3 prescriptions that I have put forward over the course of a number of years. First and foremost, within the budget, the state only requires the school systems across Maryland to have budgets within 14 broad categories. Once they establish those categories, there is no recourse, there is no need to be more transparent, and they can essentially do what they want with all of that money. And with a budget of $3.7 billion, that's a lot of money in 14 broad categories. So I've already spoken with Governor Moore about making those state reforms, so that's first and foremost. Second, as you've heard from some of the speakers, particularly Phil, we have school board members who essentially do the work all on their own in a part-time capacity. So how much oversight, how much questions, how much research can be done by someone who essentially needs another job to sustain a living in expensive Montgomery County and does not have enough support staff on the board themselves? So I have been supportive of increasing the school board to a full-time capacity, and I have very publicly said that within their own budget, they should support more staff to support them. That is how we have a more robust school board to do the oversight over a multi-billion-dollar agency. And then lastly is a proposal I just introduced a few weeks ago, and that is to have a county executive appointee on the school board. One of 7 or one of 8 members, as it will, who will be in those conversations from the very beginning, letting the superintendent and the school board know that the county executive and the council might not be supportive of a property tax increase in order to maintain the budget that they want. That is what was missing this year in particular. And people have suggested that having an appointee is a takeover, and I will say it is not a takeover, it's an addition. It is one of then 8 members who will provide a perspective for those who provide the budget.
If I could just follow you, said
Please.
the magic word, property tax increase.
Yeah.
We went and talked to the county executive today, and we asked him about what you were talking about today. And his words were that this is a quote, the county council is to blame for the situation right now for making a political decision and not accepting his property tax increase. Is the blame game helpful right now? Because we're about 24 hours away from this vote, and it looks like they've only saved a handful of jobs.
Yeah, there is no blame. This is about getting it right for our kids, full stop. And the reality is the county executive introduced a property tax increase that was dead on arrival. If people cared so much about that revenue, they should have picked up the phone, they should have counted the votes, they should have coordinated before introducing a budget that leaves us where we are right now. That's about communication, that's about leadership, that's not about blame.
So the first question was essentially my question, but I want to go a little deeper.
And I'll call anyone for assist.
I
Yeah.
want to go a little deeper. If the school system is not required to tell you all the little nooks and crannies where they're, using the money, are you hoping they'll just play nice and you can work something out? Or are you hoping to go higher and have some sort of a change in what they're required to do?
Let me give you background. 3 years ago at the council, we were reviewing the budget, and there was one of the 14 broad categories is contracting services, and it is a $100 million line item. And at the very end of the process, I asked the CFO of the school system what was in that $100 million line item, and it was a stem-winding answer because he had never been asked that question before throughout this entire process. And the response was the $100 million includes everything from snow removal to special education. And I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that that information and those budgetary line items are buried without any bullet points, without any delineation. And I knew right there that the state law was broken. And so since then, I have advocated to the highest leader in Maryland, Governor Wes Moore, saying that as we move forward with the blueprint for Maryland's future, making sure that every child across the state of Maryland gets the best education possible, which will require more revenue from our local jurisdictions, we have to request greater levels of transparency. He understood the concern. Absolutely.
There was an initial list of jobs that were to be kind of 430 full-time equivalent. They later came back last night and identified 40 roles that are currently unfilled that they can now cut. Does it bother you that they were going to cut full-time staff that were already employed first rather than these vacancies that were just sitting there?
Absolutely. What bothers me is that they were going to fire full-time employees instead of taking the vacancies out of the budget. What bothers me is that we are less than 36 hours away from a vote and the proposals continue to change and evolve regardless of the impact or the need in the community. And the reality is we've seen this train coming. It was very clear in the first few weeks of this budget process that the county executive was not going to be successful in getting his property tax increase. And so there needed to be a plan B, there needed to be a plan C. None of that happened. And the fact that we are having this conversation today, hours away from a decision, and yet those proposals and changes continue to change, is why we need to fix this process.
Does that signal to you that there aren't enough people looking at the budget that they didn't know about those vacancies to begin with?
Absolutely. I'll get an assist from Delegate Gutierrez to talk about how it used to be. Okay.
I think it still is. But your question as to what's the revenue comes from it, I think the people that reside in Montgomery County, especially those who have schools, deserve to be informed, and they deserve to know how their money is being spent. And so I urge the community who ask for that, require that, demand that, because since my years to now, the school system is very good at playing the sky is falling game. And they particularly pick these positions that they know they're going to get a reaction from those affected, from those families affected here. My God, my kid's teacher is losing their job. And they work with the teachers also raising those problems that are being created by the county council with the cuts. No, that's not fair. That's not a fair way to govern to be a responsible adult in managing the school system and governing. Not in my book. And that's why at the last minute you get these miraculous solutions, is because they've used the worst case scenario to get people to call in and to blame the last one to cut the budget, when we know that the responsibility for managing the day-to-day operations, for spending that money, spending it wisely and responsibly, it belongs to MCPS. And the head of MCPS, in an operational sense, is the superintendent. The school board is very limited, as we said before. But I really think we have to demand that kind of.
You want to say something? Okay.
I just want to make one
Yeah, go
point.
ahead.
One quick point, and it's really a complicated situation. We say, well, we're eliminating a position where it was unfilled. It's complicated. It could be an assistant principal at an elementary school that's been vacant for a couple months because that person left. That doesn't mean we don't need that position anymore. So it's a tricky balance to play. If you say, is that a position that's being eliminated? It's still a position that's needed. So it's complicated.
We'll do one more question or two more questions. Yeah.
Mr. Evan, I'm sorry. It seems from a outsider that this is like they're playing chicken with these jobs. And you're driving down the road, and these positions will not be filled. These people, and you couldn't all imagine, packing up their desk and leaving the building. I mean, it seems that way. And the other thing is, with a budget this large, do they know where all the money is going?
This is not a game. We are talking about our children's education and paying our educators as much as we can. The reality is that there have been some hyperbolic language that's been used. There has been a sky is falling attitude, and it does not serve our community well. What we need is collaboration. We need partnership. And we need a clear understanding, which can only happen when we have a clear picture of what that budget is. And budget transparency is first and foremost on my list of how we get there. And then we convene those working groups. We either have somebody appointed to the school board or have a county executive committee to deal with all of these issues. But we have to be clear-eyed about what the goal is, and that is teaching our kids and paying our teachers and having enough resources to make that possible.
I want to go back to the first question a little bit.
Yeah.
You've mentioned some solutions you were hoping. Is there anything in the county level, like legislature at the county level, that you're planning on introducing to kind of solve some of these solutions or anything? I know you mentioned the county executive thing. But.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the reality is that the school board is a state-created agency that can really only report to the state. What the council can do is provide oversight, and we provide the budget. I have provided oversight over my 8 years on this council, asking the tough questions that nobody else has, and demanding answers to questions that parents ask me all the time. And so there is only so much leverage that a council member has, but we do have to work with our state partners to make sure that these other aspects of transparency and reform. I think reform is a good thing. Just because something has been done a certain way for 50 or 60 years, we should look at it and see if it's working. And as the budget has grown by billions to serve tens of thousands of more students, we have to make sure it's working. I'm a progressive reformer. I want government to work. We want MCPS to work. I want to give them all the funding they need, and I want to make sure all the funding is going where it's supposed to. So with that, thank you all very much. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day. And we will watch and see what happens tomorrow. And it is our collective hope that we don't have to go through this kind of situation again next year, so that there is more collaboration and partnership. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.